It hit rock bottom, but if you're not a person that strives, you're going to be on the bottom.
The whole world and hit rock bottom.
When you think you've reached the bottom and then all of a sudden the bottom falls out and it gets worse.
The city of Flint, Michigan has seen the best and the worst of times. It's a city that grew up with the invention of the automobile and fell apart when the industry began to struggle. Now its people are left to wonder if this once great city has truly hit rock bottom. Our whole area grew up because of Flint's prosperity, so we thought it was imperative to make Flint the focus of our special on the economy.
We sought out people from all walks of life who could tell us about the city they live, work, and grew up around. Many of them still have hope, but all of them know that Flint is still in serious trouble. This is a story of a city once populated by a working middle class, now overpopulated with homeless, infested with crime, run-down houses, and empty factories. It's a city that may have just hit rock bottom.
The story of Flint begins and ends with the auto industry and the formation of General Motors by Billy Durant right here in Flint.
Flint, Michigan, all is excitement.
The birth of an auto giant put our city on the global map, changed the way the world operates, and totally transformed the place we live in. The auto industry also dropped us off at a step that nobody saw coming. At the beginning of the 1920s, Flint underwent its biggest surge of growth and development. The world turned from carriages to cars, and Flint, the vehicle city, was born. General Motors was created by William C. Durant, who joined together sub-companies like Buick, Oldsmobile, Chevrolet, and others to form what would become the largest corporation in the world. As business took off, the population of Flint did as well. Swarms of people started flooding in from all corners of the world to work for the now household name General Motors.
Growing up, it was really good. You know, GM, everything was here. You know, it was really good. Both my grandparents and my dad, they all retired out of GM.
More people meant more money for the economy.
General Motors built highways and railroad lines and airport and all this stuff that was built around General Motors' needs.
But the new workers had higher expectations, creating the United Auto Workers Union and demanding better working conditions and higher wages.
We had the sit-down strike in 1933 is where workers are demanding these better working conditions, they're demanding better wages. They're doing it at a time in the Great Depression where industrial capitalism really seems to be having some problems.
As a result of the sit-down strike, wages were increased, allowing union members to purchase things such as homes and cars, helping develop a more dominant middle class here in Flint.
What the kids need to learn now is what actually happened and how the middle class was created. There was no middle class before. Very few people had cars. Now, 1, 2, or 3 cars every family. We generated enough purchasing power. And the wages went up, the benefits went up. All the hospitals was built with the money that was generated by the tax base we created.
Then, after decades of being on the top, the bottom fell out. The auto industry was a competition, leaving General Motors falling behind. The overconfident automakers were blindsided with foreign companies' innovative technology. GM couldn't keep up profits and were left outsourcing to Mexico and in overseas nations where workers were willing to work for cheaper pay.
Japan was a growing threat. And if I understand my study of automotive history, it was ignored in this country. It's, hey, we are superior, we are great, there is no threat coming to us. And the imports came a-knocking, and the American public went, hey, this is a great product they're making over there at this price. It hurt us.
With layoffs and no job opportunities left in the area, people were forced to move elsewhere, leaving the once booming street struck with poverty, and Flint became a shell of its former self.
The job market is very slim.
Oh my God, the whole town went down.
Right now, it's just, it's horrible.
Most of the folks that we're serving are no longer underemployed, they're unemployed.
The town went out of here because the money left.
After decades of job losses, parts of the city have slipped into chaos. And to this day, thousands of people are hungry for some source of income. And Flint is struggling to find a new identity.
Unemployment is hitting hard in Michigan, and in particular Flint. Flint's seasonal unemployment rate hit a record-breaking 28% in 2009. And even though unemployment isn't anything new to Flint, it still doesn't get any easier to deal with.
Well, I had a whole family. The family had to adapt to the whole situation. I had to take care of the family and actually go out and look for a job after it was over with. finding a job was almost impossible.
Consequences of this god-awful recession we inherited in 2009 are still being felt particularly in local communities.
The entire nation has suffered through this recession, but Flint has definitely been one of the hardest hit cities in America, at times being almost 10% higher than the rest of the country. Flint's jobless rate reached its peak in 2009 during the heart of the recession, and now, for over 30 years, Flint's unemployment rate has been well above the national average, being especially high in the 1980s. In February 2011, the approximate amount of unemployed people living in Flint was a total of 22,243 people. And with the staggering amount of people who don't have jobs, it gets harder and harder every day to cope with the stress of how you will be able to support yourself.
How many people do you know tonight that are going to bed literally, like in the family I come from? They're staring at the ceiling, literally wondering, am I going to be able to be in this house next month? Am I going to have a roof over my head? Am I going to have to pick up the phone and call my daughter at college and say, honey, you can't go back next semester? Am I going to be able to? And the list goes on.
We lost our home. That was just the really biggest major thing. I mean, the business was the business, but losing the home was something that my family had to adapt to as well. That was a little harder.
The number of unemployed people peaked in 1990 with 33,523 people without jobs. Since then, the number of unemployed people has had great fluctuation, with 2001 being a great year for jobs and 2009 being a devastatingly hard year. And although the unemployment rate has dropped 4% in 2011, we still haven't seen much change for a once great city.
To be perfectly honest with you, Flint is getting extremely violent.
The city's just getting worse and worse and worse all the time. It's going downhill every day. The drug dealers are taking over the city.
It's bad everywhere. So it's really, I don't think there's too many places you can go to get away from the crime.
Well, I don't think that the drug use is going to go up or down. I think it's going to stay the same.
Crime rate is really up, and it's really scary here to live here.
With so many people stranded without jobs for such a long time, Flint became a haven for crime, drugs, and prostitution. The city now ranks as one of the most dangerous and violent cities in the nation, and Flint's police department is struggling to keep up.
Crime is terrible, you know, it's everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see it.
There are two big pictures on the mind of Flint residents: crime and unemployment. It's often the crime stats that get people talking, and this leaves many citizens living in fear.
When I go to bed at night, I put a block behind my door. That's how scary it is.
Flint is a place that makes you strive. If you can live in Flint, I do believe you can live anywhere. I mean, third world countries, it don't got nothing on this. You know what I'm saying? If we can live here, I'm good there.
Crime and a poor economy go hand in hand. People need money, so they're going to find ways to get it. Unfortunately, this is where crime comes into play.
My house was broken into about 3 weeks ago. I don't know what the motive was. They came in, they stole, I had a little bitty miniature radio, and they stole some open bag of potato chips. Something that cost me maybe $50. You know how much it cost me to fix my door?
In 2010, Flint set an all-time high in homicides at 66. This year, as of April, we are on pace to crush the record with 21 homicides in only 4 months.
Crime is just off the charts here. So we're number 5 in the country. Little old Flint is not. We have the number 5 crime rate in the country. We're number 1 in assaults and burglaries. We beat everybody in those 2 categories. We're number 15th in homicide. Little old Flint.
Now, as of May 2011, the FBI has officially ranked Flint as the number 1 most violent city in the United States. Crime is a growing problem, and it is only getting worse as unemployment rises. Compounding the crime problem is a lack of police officers. With the recent layoff of roughly 100 officers, this leaves only about 10 officers on duty per shift.
I think that there's other avenues as far as going instead of laying off public safety first. There's revenues throughout the city that I think are being misplaced. And I think the last thing you should go is public safety.
Could do it with 20, but 10 is just, you know, we're going to be, I'm afraid an officer is going to get killed or injured.
In 2008, when Flint had 265 sworn officers on the police force, there were 35 murders and 91 rapes in this city. In 2010, when Flint had only 144 police officers, the murder rate climbed to 65, and rapes, just to pick 2 categories, climbed to 229. In 2011, you now only have 125 shields. God only knows what the numbers will be this year for Flint if we don't rectify it.
The rising crime rate and a dwindling police force, Flint isn't becoming any safer. In this current economy, everyone is forced to do more with less.
We're going to come and do the best we can with what we have, but we're really limited with what we can do now.
It looks really, really bad. It looks bad. They should just try to put, where the homes are abandoned, take them down and put new little homes.
Someone in the city of Flint should open these houses up and let some of the homeless stay there.
We have, hundreds, perhaps thousands of homeless in our own community. I mean, that's sad.
I had infinitely more conversations with folks who had just lost their homes.
Abandoned, boarded-up houses flood the city in almost every neighborhood, and abandoned factories and businesses can be seen littering the street corners.
Abandoned businesses, empty lots, blocks of vacant or dilapidated homes. It's a scene that has left much of the city of Flint looking like a rotting corpse. Decades of economic decline in this city and surrounding area is one of the major causes for this blight. And the lack of good-paying jobs means many people cannot afford to meet even basic necessities. A lot of people in Flint have reached their desperation point, and that leads some people to act like vultures. They pick at the corpse by ripping off aluminum siding, taking copper from an empty home or building, or in some cases burning buildings down. This city is slowly deteriorating into ashes.
They say they got video surveillance on there, so hopefully nobody will try to steal no copper out of there, because they do that.
They do that,
Foreclosed homes.
They do.
My buddy had a few, and, they ended up stealing everything out of there. It's terrible, but, you got a lot of homeless people right now living on the streets in Flint. It's not a good thing, It's too bad, but that's just how life is,
Flint has been suffering through job loss for years, and it has taken its toll on Flint's neighborhoods. Added to that was the national housing crisis. The housing market crash just pushed the city lower and lower. Banks were handing out loans with extremely low interest rates. They were basically giving people money, and in turn, these people were buying expensive houses that they couldn't afford. This suddenly came to a stop when people couldn't pay off their mortgages, causing supply to rise and demand to fall, and ultimately crashing our country's housing market.
The hard part is what it does to the family that has to move out of their home. And a lot of times it's people when you go in and they tell you they've never paid a bill late, they've always paid their bills on time, they thought they'd be in that house forever, and you're coming in and because of job loss is usually what's happened. They're moving. Sometimes they're moving to an apartment, sometimes they're moving out of state.
This market has been making its way towards recovery since, but it still has a ways to go.
I'd like to see stability, and we're not headed there yet. We still until we see some correction on the number of foreclosures and the short sales in the market, we're not going to see a stable market, I don't think, still for, hard to predict. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? But it'll be some time before we see that happen.
An unstable housing market creates unstable neighborhoods. These neighborhoods are usually filled with abandoned and dangerous homes that drag down property values for everyone else. Until this market stabilizes, the future of Flint neighborhoods will continue to be bleak.
There is no doubt in my mind that this area has been hit the hardest.
This community is really struggling.
It was a spiral downfall.
Pray all we do is we just have to stay prayerful. That's all we all can do.
We talk so much about Flint's economy being a disaster, but what this really means is that the people of Flint are struggling. It's really about the families who have lost their jobs and their homes that live in the tough neighborhoods and are fighting to stay afloat.
The failing economy, unemployment, crime, and deteriorating neighborhoods makes Flint a tough place for a family to survive during this economic struggle. And nobody knows this better than Janely Burt, the director of the Outreach East Assistance Center.
It's because of the economic slowdown that we've experienced, and a lot of families that's been able to hold on as far as spending their 401ks and their savings and things like that are just now to the point where they have nothing left. And they're starting to come in. A lot of people used to donate that are at the point now where they're needing to come in for the services.
Families in Flint are struggling more and more just to get by. And the more vulnerable people are forced to turn to public services for help.
We've gone from about 1.2 million visits to food pantries and soup kitchens to 1.9 million. Most of the folks that we're serving are no longer underemployed, they're unemployed.
With Michigan having the highest rate of job losses in the country, unemployment has created an almost complete financial collapse in some parts of the state. Decades of income loss and crime has led to dangerous, crime-filled vacant neighborhoods like these. Such homes are evidence of the toll the economy has taken on the Flint area. Children are forced to play next to neighborhoods infested with crime and prostitution, and beside homes that are run down, empty, and unsafe. Only 53% of kids in the Flint public schools graduate, and many turn to a life of crime that they are surrounded by. One local mother of two, who was laid off from her job of 7 years, felt the full impact of having to rely on public services for help.
There was days when we didn't even know, where our next meal was going to come from.
According to the 2010 census, Michigan's the only state in the nation to see any increase in its poverty level. Michelle and her husband lived that statistic when they both lost their jobs.
We spent a lot of time on unemployment, and we thank God that we had the unemployment, because I don't know how we would have done it otherwise.
The loss of both jobs put a lot of stress on the Norris family.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And all we had was, between drawing closer to each other and, putting it in God's hands to help get you through what you got to get through.
Even through the midst of their struggle, Michelle and her family still hung on to their hope.
Very, very thankful that there's people out there that still care and still try to help when you're having a hard time. It's really funny, sometimes, I may not have much, but if somebody's got it harder than I do, helping them too, because if you don't, you don't kind of help each other from here and there. It's like leaving people behind. And you just don't leave people behind.
The city can turn around, we just need income.
He's killing this city with these layoffs.
Policing is an issue in town.
I don't think I would have supported the layoffs to the degree that the mayor's done the layoffs.
At the center of all economic problems is Flint's government. They've accepted the duty of renewing the city, and they're stuck making some pretty profound cuts.
The city of Flint, let's face it, is in horrible shape, but they're doing the best they can. And I say they, meaning, of course, it's an it, but they are doing the best they can to maintain the status that we have right now.
Like many cities across the country, Flint is facing a serious budget crisis. Currently, Flint is running a $17 million deficit. The city of Flint gets its funding from 3 sources: income tax collection, property taxes, and the state of Michigan. Flint has a serious budget problem because its main source of income, the state, is running a $1.6 billion deficit.
Most of our citizens haven't had a clue in terms of having good, simple information about where we are financially, because it is a mess.
I gotta hope that, the unemployment rate will get, to a point where it's manageable in this community. Right now, it's horrible.
With Flint's economy being as horrible as it is, the problem is being compounded by people fleeing the city in search of jobs, and this causes property taxes to diminish, taking even more money from the city's bottom line, causing Flint's main source of income, property tax, to diminish.
Property taxes, if people are leaving the city, leaving their homes, a lot of vacant houses in the city, we don't collect property taxes on those.
This loss of income leads to Flint city officials having to make tough and crucial decisions, laying off government workers that Flint desperately needs.
A lot of it is beyond our control. We deal with it the best we can. As I said earlier, we might end up with a state emergency manager who could take control from council and the mayor and make even harsher decisions than the mayor's already made in terms of layoffs. That could happen.
The city's money problems are causing the local government to be in disarray, and that is carrying over to the school system, where this year they are running a $20 million deficit. This year, the schools were forced to pink slip almost a third of its teachers, and they continue to close schools and lay off staff. The city government is fighting an uphill battle to stay afloat, but attracting new businesses to the area is critical to improve the economy and keep people living in Flint.
There's a lot of love in this town, just that people ain't giving it a chance.
There is hope. There is reason to believe.
We got 700 or 800 people now living downtown.
We're all working towards the same goal. Nobody wants to see anything fail. We want to figure it out together.
For a city that's been through so much, you can still see a glimmer of hope in some people's eyes when they talk about a comeback, and some people think that a comeback is already underway.
With all the things that are going wrong in Flint, we still have a glimmer of hope for the city to rise from its own ashes. Many agree that the future is centered on one thing:
Education.
Education, absolutely.
It's education. It's education. It's a priority, and prioritizing education. It's proven that if you educate people, they are going to pull themselves out of poverty, because poverty is the big barrier.
There is a clear line between where the poverty ends and college campuses begin. Flint is blessed with 4 colleges, 3 being close to the downtown area.
Well, there's been so many positive things. One of the greatest things is the housing that's started with the old Riverfront Hotel that's been remodeled. And so there's wonderful activity there with college students from both U of M, Flint, Kettering, even Baker and Mott that are available.
And the answer that education is bringing to Flint is people living downtown. The fact that there is student housing on Saginaw Street has given incentives to businesses to come into the city and set up shop.
Having colleges and universities in a town is good business sense.
Student housing and businesses are creating an influx of money. Now the city has attractions such as Back to the Bricks, which drew 300,000 people into the downtown area.
They have that perspective of downtown that it's this dying city. They read everything in the news. It's usually generally negative. But when they come downtown, the first thing he said is, holy cow, I didn't know this stuff was here. I didn't know these restaurants were here. I didn't know there was a Mexican place. I didn't know you had a grocery store, because the word doesn't get out about those things. So it helps to change the attitude of downtown Flint, which is in turn helping change downtown Flint itself.
As people come in, they see that downtown Flint isn't as bad as it once was, so they feel safer walking into restaurants and the cafes and all the little places that have opened up down here. So they're seeing that it's safer to walk around versus what it was before.
There are also 3 of some of the most top-rated hospitals in the state and a beautiful cultural center. Flint has a lot to offer. The automotive industry was the vehicle that carried the city of Flint to greatness and built the city itself. But the auto industry is no longer something we can rely on.
Right now, the city of Flint is hoping that education can be the hand to pull it from despair. But will that be enough to bring the entire city back?
The downtown area is starting to breathe new life in Flint. But has this city hit rock bottom, or is there still worse to come?
That question has yet to be fully answered, but it's clear that Flint has a long road back to recovery.